A 6-year-old girl, Grace, stood on the porch. Her small suitcase burst open on the lawn. Her stepfather, Mark, his face red with rage and whiskey, pointed a trembling finger. "You are not my daughter. You are a burden. Get out." It had been only a week since her mother's funeral. The woman beside him, her mother's cousin Valerie, just watched with a cold smirk. Grace knelt on the cold pavement, dirt staining her dress, tears streaming down her face. She begged, "Daddy, please. I'll be good. I can sleep on the sofa." But the door slammed shut. Neighbors whispered behind their curtains but did nothing. The little girl was left alone, sobbing, clutching the one thing she had left, a worn teddy bear. She was completely abandoned, until the headlights of a black Bentley cut through the dusk. A tall man in a crisp suit, Arthur Blackwood, stepped out. He looked at the child, then at the closed door. He walked past the scattered clothes, picked up the bear, and extended his hand to the terrified girl. He spoke a single sentence that would change everything. "From now on, you're coming with me. What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video." Grace hesitated. She looked at Mark, waiting for him to stop this, but he wouldn't even meet her eyes. He just turned and went back inside. Valerie smiled, triumphant. Finally, Grace's small, trembling hand touched Arthur's. Behind her, the heavy oak door slammed shut. The sound echoed down the quiet suburban street, sealing the end of her past life. Arthur bent down, gathering the broken suitcase and quickly stuffing Grace's few belongings inside. He wiped the dirt off the teddy bear with the sleeve of his expensive jacket and returned it to her arms. Without another word, he helped her to her feet. Her small hand gripped his wrist, as if terrified he might disappear. "Let's go." "Sweetheart," Arthur said softly. He opened the passenger door of the black Bentley, buckled her into the seat, and adjusted it for a 6-year-old's frame. Grace hugged the bear tightly to her chest, her eyes red, unable to lift her face. Arthur's cream vest got stained as he leaned over, but he didn't notice. He turned on the heat, checked the belt one more time, and closed the door. Across the porch, the main door of the house remained shut. Next door, Mrs. Peterson, the elderly neighbor, pulled back her curtain just enough to see. She opened her window and called out to the empty street, her voice trembling but firm. The girl did nothing wrong. Arthur looked up, nodding his gratitude. He would remember that face. The truth always needed witnesses. Arthur walked around the car, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. Inside the vehicle, the air felt heavy. Grace remained perfectly still, clutching the teddy bear so hard her nails dug into the worn fabric. Speaking slowly, keeping his voice low so as not to startle her, Arthur said, "I'm Arthur. Your name is Grace, isn't it? I think I heard your mother talk about you." Grace pressed her lips together, her voice barely a whisper. "My name is Grace." Arthur managed a small, sad smile. "Your mother was the best friend I ever had. I promise you I will not leave you alone." Grace shifted slightly, her head still down. "Mommy used to talk about Uncle Arthur," she murmured. "She said you were the only one who always helped her." He took a deep breath, trying to steady his own voice. "Thank you for telling me that. Things will be different now. You are safe." Grace hugged the bear tighter. After a long pause, she whispered, "Can I stay with you?" "Just for tonight?" "Of course," Arthur replied immediately. "My home is in Beacon Hill. There's a guest room. I'll call ahead and have the housekeeper prepare warm blankets." Arthur's phone vibrated softly. The name Anne, his personal assistant at the firm, flashed on the screen. He silenced the call. He didn't want to break the fragile calm that had just settled over the child. Instead, he typed a brief message. "Do not call now. Handling something important. I will contact you later." At his firm, everyone was used to him putting people before work, especially when a child was involved. The car pulled away from the quiet western suburb. Arthur turned the heat up slightly, grabbed a small bottle of water from the console, and offered it to her. "Take a sip." Grace accepted the bottle with both hands. She took tiny sips, careful not to spill, as if a single mistake meant everything would be taken away. Arthur watched her in the rearview mirror, weighing how to begin. When I was about your age, he said, I had to leave a place that was supposed to be my home. I grew up in foster care. There were days I felt invisible, like nobody saw me. But your mom, she saw me. And there was a friend, too. Someone who helped me through the darkest part. Grace slowly turned her face toward him. For the first time since getting in the car, she looked at him. Her eyes were still swollen, but the panic in them had softened. Did Mom talk about you a lot? Yes, Arthur said. We talked about how much you love to draw, how you enjoy vanilla ice cream in the Boston Common, and how you always sleep hugging your teddy bear. She was proud of you. Grace swallowed, set the bottle down, and hugged the bear again. After the funeral, Daddy Mark, he wouldn't look at me. Aunt Valerie said I was messing everything up. She said as soon as Daddy signed all the papers, I wouldn't be there anymore. I tried so hard to be good. Her voice faltered. Then she added quietly, almost as if afraid to wake something hidden. I miss Mommy so much. Every night she read me a story. Sometimes it was Charlotte's Web. Sometimes Goodnight Moon. After reading, she sang me to sleep. She always sang, You Are My Sunshine. When she sang, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Now, I can't turn the light off at night. Arthur felt his chest tighten, but he kept his voice steady. He let the silence stretch, just long enough for her words to rest in the air, uninterrupted. In his mind, the image of the hospital room returned. The sharp smell of disinfectant, Sarah's face worn thin by cancer, and her last call. If anything happens, Arthur, please. Look after her for me. And now, her daughter was sitting beside him, clinging to a worn-out teddy bear, confessing she was too afraid to sleep in the dark. He couldn't comprehend how adults could treat a child this way. No child should ever have to prove they deserve a home, Arthur said slowly. This is not your fault. Adults grieve in complicated ways, and sometimes they let themselves be led by others. But that does not make you a mistake. You are safe here. Grace didn't respond immediately. After a moment, she slid one small finger onto the sleeve of Arthur's jacket, barely brushing it, as if testing if his solidity was real. Arthur stayed still, taking the gesture as an answer. His voice softened. Tonight, just rest. Tomorrow we will talk to some good people. There's a detective named Miller. She's very skilled. And if you're okay with it, during the day, I'll take you to see a child psychologist. Just to make sure you're sleeping and eating well. Not because anything is wrong with you. Grace nodded slightly. She hadn't opened her heart completely, but she was no longer curled in on herself as she had been on the porch. On her lap, the teddy bear was placed more carefully. The car approached the city. The drive was long, but the silence inside was different now. It felt like a resting place, not a bottomless pit. Arthur glanced in the mirror and saw her eyes, still red but fixed on him, as if he were her anchor. Grace, he said, I will not abandon you. The little girl lifted her face, her lips trembling slightly. Her voice was so soft it was almost a sigh. Did my mommy ever tell you, if I was alone one day, who I should trust? Arthur didn't answer Grace's question immediately. He signaled and moved to the slowest lane, placing his warm hand gently over her small one, a silent guarantee. Let's get home first, he said. Then I'll tell you. The car pulled up in front of a historic brownstone in Beacon Hill. The doorman, Mr. Harris, opened the car door. His eyes softened with compassion seeing the small girl clutching a teddy bear, but he maintained his professional composure. Good evening, Mr. Blackwood. Arthur nodded, speaking quietly. Could you take the suitcase, please? Mr. Harris simply replied, Yes, sir, and followed them silently. In the wood-paneled elevator, Grace stayed close to Arthur. Arthur pressed the penthouse button. He lowered his voice. Your mother did talk about me. She said if anything bad ever happened, you could trust me. Grace tilted her head up slightly, then quickly looked down, as if afraid to hold too much hope. The doors opened. Mrs. Davis, the middle-aged housekeeper, was waiting. She operated on the neat principles of New England order, direct, but discreet. I've warmed the chicken soup, sir. There is toast and warm milk. She looked at Grace and offered a kind smile, asking no further questions. Arthur thanked her. I'll take care of Grace tonight. Please, get some rest. The dining room was lit, just enough. Arthur pulled out a chair for Grace. He placed a bowl of soup and a small glass of milk in front of her. Steam rose gently, but Grace didn't touch the spoon. She sat still, eyes fixed on the table, smoothing the edge of her teddy bear's dress. Arthur sat across from her, not pushing. He put his own spoon down and began to talk. When I was your age, I didn't have anyone either. I grew up in the foster system. Other kids made fun of me for my cheap shoes, my old coat. People said I'd never amount to anything. Grace looked up, just a little, as if wanting to hear more. Back then, your mother's house was right across from the group home. Arthur continued slowly. She used to come over. She brought cookies, used books, and sometimes some good coats. She remembered every one of our names. She'd ask us what we studied, what we wanted to read next. For me, she did many small things that turned out to be big. She showed me the way to the public library. She paid the fee for an aptitude test I couldn't afford. She gave me a coat that actually fit. And most importantly, she gave me faith when everyone else shook their heads. Your mother was the one who helped me stand tall and find the determination to get out. So one day, I could be where I am now. Grace picked up the spoon, stirred the soup once, and set it down again. She pressed her lips together tightly for a long moment, and then she burst into tears, as if she had been holding them back for too many days. I just want Daddy Mark to hug me one more time. Like before Mommy died. He used to lift me up high. He bought me vanilla ice cream. He read me stories. Now he looks at me like he's looking through a wall. Arthur slid a napkin toward her. He didn't rush to offer empty comfort. He let her cry. You have a right to remember, he said after a deep breath. But you also have a right to be loved again. No one can steal your memories, and the future is still waiting for you. Grace wiped her eyes and reached for the milk. She took a sip, then another. The soup was still warm, and she ate it, small, slow spoonfuls. It wasn't appetite, but at least she was no longer starving herself. Arthur stood up and went to his study, returning with a small box. He placed it in front of her, opening it to reveal a scuffed metal keychain in the shape of a star. When I left the group home, this was all I had. Your mother gave it to me. She said, when you're scared, hold this. It will remind you that someone believes in you. Now I'm giving it to you. When you're scared, hold it tight, and remember that I am here. Grace touched the star lightly with her fingertip, then pulled her hand back. She looked at Arthur. The suspicion in her eyes lessened, though still cautious. What if Daddy Mark wants to see me? Arthur kept his voice low and firm. The first thing is that you are safe. The rest, that is for the adults to do their part. Take responsibility and fix things. When you are ready, then we will talk about a meeting. The dinner finished slowly. Mrs. Davis cleared the tray silently. Arthur guided Grace to a small guest room. The bed was already turned down with fresh sheets, and a nightlight shaped like a moon was on the table. He checked the window, drew the curtains, then opened the closet and pulled out a light sweater. If you get cold, put this on. Grace placed her teddy bear on the pillow and stared at the nightlight for a long time. She turned hesitant. Uncle Arthur, did Mommy really believe? Yes, Arthur answered. She was afraid she wouldn't live long enough to see you grow up. But she chose to believe. She believed that good people would find you, and you would find good people. The girl nodded and climbed into bed. Arthur stepped back, letting her feel her own space. He dimmed the lights, leaving only a soft glow. Before closing the door, he spoke through the small gap. If you need me, call out. Any time. The door closed softly, but the hallway light remained on. Arthur returned to his study and opened his briefcase. A faded photograph emerged. A smiling Sarah leaning on his shoulder, her eyes bright. He placed the photo on the desk. The phone lit up. A message from Anne. Need me to arrange a meeting with Detective Miller and the child psychologist? Dr. Leah Jimenez has an opening tomorrow morning. Arthur replied. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. and contact the lawyer Robert Thorne for the afternoon. Thank you, Anne. He sat in the silence, listening for small footsteps in the hall. Nothing. Just the even breathing of a child who had finally fallen into a deep sleep. Arthur held the photograph, closing his eyes for a moment, as if speaking to the friend he had lost. I'll keep my promise, Sarah. While Arthur turned off the living room light, watching over Grace as she slept in another corner of the city, the sharp clink of a glass against a wooden bar broke the silence. Mark slumped at the counter, the smell of whiskey mixed with the stale trace of cigarette smoke. Mike, his longtime drinking buddy, sat beside him, stirring the ice in his glass out of habit. A man of 45, reckless with his words, Mike loved to push others into things they'd later regret. "Drink up, Mark," Mike laughed. "It'll clear your head." Mark downed his glass. His eyelids felt heavy. His voice was rough. "She's a burden. When I look at her, all I see are things that will never come back." Mike signaled the bartender for another round. "Don't make it complicated. Once the paperwork is done, you'll finally have peace. Without your signature, we wouldn't even be sitting here tonight." The bar door opened. Valerie entered, her tight dress catching the light. She walked straight to Mark, placing a slender hand on his shoulder, her tone soothing. "You're exhausted, and it's natural. The girl looks too much like her mother, always reminding you of the past. You need to rest." Mark turned his face away but didn't shrug off her touch. He ordered another drink. Valerie let out a silent sigh, then slid into the space between Mark and Mike, claiming it as her own. At the other end of the bar, a young woman got up from her seat, pretending to make a phone call. No one paid her any attention. She wore a baseball cap, a dark jacket, and her eyes missed nothing. This was Detective Miller, a homicide detective whose habit was to remain as still as a shadow until the exact moment to capture what mattered. Valerie's gaze shifted to the door. Carla arrived. She looked to be about 28, heavily made up, and held a thick envelope. Carla breezed past the bar, skillfully slid the envelope into Valerie's purse, and leaned in to whisper. "It's all in there. The power of attorney to manage the trust fund, some transfer orders, and the draft of the agreement. Just needs his signature." Valerie nodded slightly, not looking back at Carla. She turned again, pressing closer to Mark, her voice dripping like honey. "Honey, you just have to sign. I'll take care of the rest. I promise everything will be clean. The accounts, the house, no one will bother you anymore." Mark squinted, pulled out his wallet. His fingers stalled at the slot holding an old photograph. 3 people in the glow of an afternoon sun. His younger self, the woman he had lost, and Grace. A tiny girl. A wave of silence cut through his chest like an icy wind. His hand trembled slightly. "No," Mark muttered. "Not tonight." "Not yet?" Mike scoffed, nudging Mark. "How long do you want to keep tormenting yourself? Sign it, and finally sleep like a man at peace." Valerie placed the envelope on the bar and opened it slightly. The papers gleamed under the bar light. Her voice was soft as wool. "It's just a formality, Mark. I'm not taking anything from you. I'm helping you find peace." Mark looked at the first page. The bold letters, "Temporary authorization," looked blurry through the haze of alcohol. He swallowed. The photo sticking out of his wallet still showed the corner of an old 3-person hug, watching him without a word. His breathing grew heavier. He slammed the bottom of his glass on the bar with a sharp crack, as if drowning his memories in the bottom of the cup. "Get me a pen." Mike laughed and signaled the bartender for one. Valerie pushed the papers closer, placing the pen right where he needed to sign. She leaned in, her voice brushing his ear. "Right here, Mark." At the back table, Detective Miller discreetly raised her phone. She zoomed in as Carla pointed to the line of text, as Valerie pushed the envelope, and as Mike blocked the view from behind. The faint click of the camera blended into the background music. Mark placed the pen on the paper. His wrist froze. The photo in his wallet was still open. The little girl in the picture was smiling, a smile from many years ago before the sky fell. Mark blinked. The vein in his temple throbbed. "Mark," Valerie urged, her voice sharpening with impatience. "Sign it." He took a deep, shuddering breath and a long pull of whiskey, as if drinking in courage. The pen drew a shaky line. The ink bled onto the paper. Miller took another picture. Her camera captured the man's trembling hand, the thick envelope, and the sharp look Valerie shot at Carla like a knife. Mike raised his glass. "That's the Mark I know." Valerie closed the envelope, tucked it back into her purse, and let a thin smile draw across her lips like a red thread. "Done. Starting tomorrow, things will be much quieter." Mark covered his face with his hand. He didn't look at anyone. In his wallet, the old photo slid further down into the leather slot, hidden from view. At the back table, Miller lowered her phone, stood up, and walked past them without a glance, leaving only a tip for the bartender. Her steps were firm and light. By the time the door closed behind her, she already had what she came for. The moment when 3 names appeared in the same frame, Mark, Valerie, Carla, and a signature still wet with ink. Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of peace and reflection as you follow this healing story and its journey of courage and justice. When the bar door closed behind Valerie, Detective Miller had her evidence. By dawn, Arthur received a brief email. There is evidence. Keep the child safe. We'll be in touch. Later that morning, Arthur drove Grace back to Mrs. Peterson's house in Weston. The elderly neighbor pulled Grace into a hug, her voice breaking. Honey, I knocked on the door, I talked to them, but... They sat around the small dining table. Arthur opened his notebook. Mrs. Peterson spoke slowly. I saw the child kneeling, begging him. And that woman, Valerie, said, let her be. Then she closed the door. Grace, sitting near the window, took a crayon and a blank piece of paper. Without being told, she began to draw a house. 3 figures. The mother in the center, Grace on the left, the man on the right with his back turned. Arthur looked at the drawing, feeling a lump in his throat. Would you like to tell me more? Grace kept her eyes on the paper. I heard Aunt Valerie say, she whispered, that when Daddy signed all the papers, I wouldn't be there anymore. The crayon pressed harder. Shading the door in dark, heavy strokes, Mrs. Peterson grabbed Arthur's hand. Do something. The child can't take any more. Arthur nodded and pulled out his phone, calling the lawyer, Robert Thorne. Thorne's voice was firm. Send me everything. I'll file for a temporary restraining order and request an emergency hearing. Arthur forwarded Miller's email and a photo of Grace's drawing. Thorne replied immediately. A neighbor witness is gold. See you at the office at 2 White. Arthur turned to Grace. I will go with you. No one has the right to erase you from your own home. What if Daddy doesn't want me anymore? Then we will let the law answer that, Arthur said gently. And even so, there are still people who want you. I am one of them. The hallway of the Boston family court was brightly lit. Thorne walked ahead. Detective Miller was already waiting, handing over a USB drive. The original is here, she said. Arthur crouched down to straighten Grace's shirt collar. All you have to do is tell the truth. No one can take your voice. In the courtroom, Judge Patricia Cole took her seat. Across the aisle, Valerie sat beside her lawyer, Peter Dassa. Mark followed, his eyes sunken and tired. Valerie whispered to him, You have to prove the child is unwell or we'll lose everything. Thorne stood. Your Honor, we are seeking a temporary protection order for Grace and submitting evidence of expulsion and asset manipulation. He submitted Miller's USB. Dassa held up a stack of papers. The defense presents a psychological evaluation. The document indicates Grace shows instability, invents stories, and cannot remain in a triggering environment. Valerie looked at Arthur triumphantly. Thorne arched an eyebrow. May we know the basis and the person who conducted this evaluation? Dassa's lips curled. A family therapy specialist. For privacy reasons, we request not to disclose the name. Judge Cole tapped her gavel. Without identification and verification, this document will not be considered evidence. Mrs. Peterson was called. She spoke evenly. I saw the child kneeling. I begged him not to do it, but the door closed anyway. Mark lowered his head. It was Grace's turn. Arthur helped her to the stand. Her small hand found Arthur's and held on tight. Dassa tried to assert authority. Grace, do you know that lying is wrong? I know. Have you ever made up a story just so Mr. Blackwood would give you gifts? Arthur was on his feet. Objection. Leading and insulting. Sustained, the judge agreed. Thorne stepped forward. Grace, can you tell the court why you were afraid? Grace swallowed. Because Aunt Valerie said that when Daddy finished signing the papers, I wouldn't be there anymore. The room went silent. Dassa tried to recover. As the court can see, the child is traumatized. This is a sign of instability, Thorne countered immediately. Being thrown out of your home is not a sign of instability. It is a real experience. He then played the audio from the bar. Valerie's voice filled the room. Once he signed, the girl would have to go. Valerie tensed, then whispered sharply to Mark. Say she made it up. Just one sentence. Mark stared at his shoes. Judge Cole looked at the evidence. Grace, seeing Mark's silence, took a shaky breath. Her eyes found Mark. Daddy. Her voice cracked. Do you remember the time we ate ice cream together in the Boston Common? The question landed like a stone. Mark lifted his head, frozen. Grace clutched her bear. It was a Sunday. Mommy was reading a book. You gave me a piggyback ride and said, let's go find some sunshine. We went to the Common. You bought me 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream. One melted on my hand and you laughed before you licked it off. I said that was gross. And you laughed harder. That day the wind was perfect. Her voice was clear. Mark was shaking in his seat. The images flooded back. The blue-covered book, the scent of vanilla, the sticky sweetness on his daughter's small palm. Grace turned fully to him. You used to be the best daddy. Why don't you even recognize me anymore? Mark slumped, covering his face. I was wrong, he whispered, broken. Valerie, I abandoned my little girl. Valerie jumped to her feet, her voice sharp as glass. Don't listen to her! She's making it up. Mark, tell them. Mark didn't look at her. You can't make some things up, he said quietly. Valerie erupted, her polished veneer cracking. You all ganged up on me. You're just like your sister, always stealing everything from me. The courtroom stared. In her rage, she had confessed her motive. Thorne played his final card. Your Honor, regarding the psychological report, we verified it with the state board. The doctor listed as unlicensed. The document is a forgery. Dasa turned pale. Judge Cole's face was stone. The court will recess to deliberate. A verdict will be announced tomorrow at 9:12 a.m. The next morning the room was tense. Judge Cole entered. After considering the testimonies and evidence, the court finds the defendant, Valerie, is guilty of embezzlement and fraud. She is sentenced to prison. The lawyer, Peter Dasa, is disbarred for presenting falsified documents. Officers approached Valerie. She turned to look at Mark, her eyes filled with hate, and then she was led away. Mark stood slowly and turned to Grace. His voice was hoarse. I betrayed you and I betrayed your mother. I don't deserve to be called Dad. Grace clung to her teddy bear. A tear slipped down her hand. I can't forgive you yet, she whispered. But I don't want to lose you again. I'll fix it, Mark promised. No matter how long it takes, Judge Cole continued. Regarding custody, to ensure the best interests of Grace, temporary guardianship will be shared between Arthur Blackwood and Mark, under the supervision of Child Protective Services. A woman named Karen introduced herself as the court-appointed social worker. When the hearing ended, Mark said, I'll see you on Thursday at Ms. Karen's office. I'll be on time. Grace nodded slightly. The months passed. Karen supervised the visits. Every Thursday, Mark arrived on time. He stopped drinking. He went back to his carpentry workshop. Grace saw a child therapist. At first, she only drew. Gradually, she began to talk. She lived with Arthur, who started a foundation in Sarah's name to support children in foster care. One afternoon, they agreed to meet at the Boston Common. Grace wore a new dress. Arthur sat on their usual bench. Mark appeared, quiet and steady. Hi, sweetheart. Grace looked at him, then opened her backpack and took out her old teddy bear. Holding it with both hands, she offered it to him. Mommy bought me this, Grace said. I'm giving it to you now, but I'll be waiting to see you change. Mark received it, pressing the bear to his chest. I'll bring it with me every time I come, he said, his voice thick. And every time, I will do exactly what I promised. Arthur watched them, a faint smile on his lips. You have 2 fathers now, Grace. One who created the memories you carry, and one who will help you create the future. Grace looked at Arthur, then at Mark. She extended her left hand to Arthur, and her right hand to Mark. Mark hesitated, then placed his rough hand in his daughter's. I'll try to trust again, Grace said, because I think Mommy would want that too. From a distance, they looked like a broken rope being retied. not yet seamless, but growing stronger. In the middle of the park, a small girl ran between two men, holding tight to both sides, the living symbol of a family rebuilt from the ruins.